Chamberlain to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Sir Christopher, and a Happy New Year. I think we're probably in the dregs of when we can say this, but it's a pleasure as always to serve under your chairship. And I also welcome the Minister for what I hope is going to be a constructive half-an-hour debate. I want to start my speech this morning, Sir Christopher, by briefly setting out what ATAS is, because if there's one thing I've learned in the last few months, it's that there is quite a low salience about it, and including, I regret to say, in the Foreign Office itself. And I hope if this debate achieves nothing else, it resolves that. ATAS, known properly as the Academic Technology Approval Scheme, is a system by which additional checks are carried on international students and researchers of certain nationalities or those working in security-related fields. It's clearly an incredibly important process, and one which exists in some form or other in most other countries where advanced research is taking place. And ATAS checks are most commonly needed when individuals are going to be studying, researching or working in subject topics that could be used to develop advanced conventional military technology, weapons of mass destruction or indeed their delivery systems. So an obvious reason why it is important to get ATAS right, because also the type of research which in the wrong hands could be used to develop weapons of mass destruction, for example, is also the type of research which is critical for making many non-military advancements. For example, biophysics research and molecular medicine involves groundbreaking discoveries in diagnosis and treatment of diseases which change the lives of millions of people. Creating novel chemical materials could revolutionise food packaging and how it is recycled. We all know we need better energy systems and sources, and buses, for example, commonly run now on hydrogen. A move in Scotland, I'm proud to say, was supported by the experts at the University of St Andrews in my constituency within its School of Chemistry. And then, Sir Christopher, there is AI. We know it is having a huge impact on how we live our lives. And I really want to make sure that the best and brightest are here in the UK working on it, ensuring the development of AI includes the necessary guardrails to prevent its abuse. And these are just a few examples of research subjects which could require ATAS approval for an international student or academic. But my point, Sir Christopher, is this. If we want the UK to be world leaders in research and development, which is key to the government's modern industrial strategy, then we need to attract the brightest and the best. And we can't do that if the security checks needed for their visas to be processed isn't working. I'm delighted to give way to the Honourable Member for Strangford.
Sir Christopher, can I thank the Honourable Lady as always for bringing forward subjects to the Westminster Hall, indeed in the Chamber as well, which are incredibly important. Universities back home, such as Queen's University and the University of Ulster, have many ATAS students and researchers who study in sensitive areas such as science, engineering and technology. Many of them funded research positions in Northern Ireland have been delayed or even unfulfilled due to ATS processing times having a significant impact on the system. Does the Honourable Lady agree that clearance must be secured in a timely manner so that vital research postings can be taken advantage and more must be done to achieve just that? Thank you so much.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Member for his intervention. He always manages to get in advance the key topics that we want to raise in the debate, and certainly timescales in relation to ATAS is one of the things that I'm going to touch on. And I'll do that right now by turning first the time it takes for these ATAS checks to be carried out. Now, the Minister wrote to me last week, I'm very grateful, confirming a standard timeframe of 30 working days, 6 weeks to process applications, and I'd say that that seems quite reasonable for something technical that we clearly want to get right. But the problem is that response timescale isn't exactly everyone's experience. I've had casework for academics and students coming to the University of St Andrews with delays of up to 6 months, and an experience that is shared by the Russell Group of universities who reached out to me in advance of this debate. And I know processing delays aren't anything new, but there are just a few elements I want to pull out here. Most postgraduate programmes of study and research programmes have defined start and end dates, and that is particularly true when grant funding is being utilised. Missing those start dates due to ATS delays means that research students miss the start of their course and that research projects might need to delay their start dates or begin without key personnel. I certainly know for the University of St Andrews that they will not make a formal offer without the ATS being completed, and the student can't apply for their visa without receiving that formal offer for the university. So these are different roadblocks in the way to getting approval. Sir Christopher, can you imagine securing the funding for a groundbreaking piece of research and having attracted the best global talent, having to find out that days before the project is due to start, you still don't know if you can go ahead, and you find yourself having to go back to the finance provider to ask for leniency, change contract dates and funding arrangements, and all, of course, worrying whether that funding might ultimately be withdrawn, and that could jeopardise your chances of receiving future support, or that the individual in question might give up on the process and secure employment elsewhere. And whilst I'm relieved that in my conversations with the University of St Andrews, it has managed to deal with the stress of these concerns but not the losses themselves, I have been told by the Russell Group of other universities who have experienced researchers and students withdrawing applications and going to other research-intensive nations instead, and large R&D businesses withdrawing from university-led projects because they could not wait any longer for applications to be approved. So I asked the Minister then whether the 30-day standard period is a reasonable reflection of capacity. Would a 40 or even 50-day target be better, perhaps? And then universities and applicants can plan accordingly. And could this be put into a formal service level agreement so that universities, applicants and funding providers can manage expectations? There are naturally peaks to the number of applications for review over the summer period, given that the academic cycle, even for non-taught research, tends to start in the autumn. Are there steps the government could be taking to prepare for this? Are there extra resources that could be put in place? And I understand the highly technical nature of the checks being carried out means that scientific experts are needed who are already in high demand at Whitehall. Does the Minister feel that the FCDO has sufficient scientific capacity to meet demand? Is this something that engagement with the university sector and the specialists we have here could perhaps resolve? Now, Sir Christopher, I mentioned casework because as an MP that is a huge part of what our job is. Visa problems, DWP issues, HMRC delays, these are the bread and butter of our inbox and the work our constituency staff does. Trying to find out the problem and what can be done to unstick it, whatever is stuck. But frustratingly, we cannot do this with ATS. There is just one email address for it, for use by universities, MPs, students, or indeed anyone else who needs to get in touch. I'm not sure I've actually ever received a response from it. I'm not surprised, it must be absolutely inundated. Surely there must be a better system. I know I'd rather we didn't have delays with visas or pensions, which my team have to chase up on constituents' behalf, but it's at least something we can do, which can give some answers to why things are moving slowly and when indeed an answer can be expected. Would the Minister look into an MP hotline or a dedicated email for use by registered universities? And we can, of course, get in touch with the Home Office as these ATS delays stop visas being processed. But this doesn't help at all with UKVI officials left as in the dark as everyone else over the status of an ATS check. Like us, all they can do is wait. The opacity of the system was thrown into sharp relief for me towards the end of last year with one particular piece of casework. My constituent, an academic at the University of St Andrews, was applying for his visa to be renewed. This was all completely routine. But tragically, having submitted all the information and with the ATS checks underway, his father unexpectedly took ill and then passed away. He naturally wanted to travel home to Syria to see his family, pay respects and indeed as the eldest son to arrange and play a part in his father's funeral. He immediately contacted UKVI and asked for permission to travel. The next developments, I understand, are out with the remit of the Minister and why we're here today, but they are worth noting. There doesn't seem to be a Home Office exemption to allow for time-limited bereavement travel, even where evidence of death has been provided. And the UKVI escalation process, while effective, is still slow in consideration of the cultural norms for burial soon after death in many countries. And all this means that my constituent had missed his father's funeral before any answers had been received. Nonetheless, he still wanted to return home, be with his family and pay his respects as soon as possible. And this is where we return to ATAS, because he was told that if he left the country, he would need to start his visa and ATS applications all over again. That would require him to incur significant costs and uncertainty and risk serious disruption to his ongoing academic responsibilities. The only option, we were told by the Home Office, was to try and get his visa renewal through as quickly as possible, leaving that one big stumbling block, the inability to directly contact, chase or otherwise check in with ATS over his security checks. Without knowing how long the current waiting period was and without ATS having any guidance or grounds for expedition in compassionate circumstances. Now, my team are a pretty resourceful bunch. They tried everything they could think of. They obviously emailed the public email address. We wrote to the FCDO. We rang the FCDO's helpline. And I was told on that phone call that the FCO did not know what ATS was and whether it was part of their remit. That's a bit worrying. When explained, we were asked that surely this should be the responsibility of the Home Office. It went on. Now, there is a positive ending in this case. Although my constituent missed the funeral, as I've outlined, and that initial mourning period, his cheques did go through and his visa was renewed. He was able to see his mother and sister and pay his respects to his father. I'm not convinced that anything that my office did, or indeed myself, because I did try to speak to a couple of FCDO ministers in the House, actually did anything in that regard. And I know that the Minister will point out that in the end my constituent ATS checks were done within the 6-week processing window. It is true that this is not one of the cases of terrible delays which I referred to earlier. But it clearly demonstrates, Sir Christopher, the need for an escalation routes for MPs or sponsoring universities, the need for the transparent processing timeframes, the need for a compassionate travel route or other allowances for bereaved applicants, or at least knowledge of what the process can and should be and whether indeed it's possible at all. And above all, some form of knowledge or oversight within the FCDO, given that nobody seemed to know that ATS existed or was an FCDO responsibility. So, Christopher, something called the Academic Technology Approval Scheme might be incredibly dry, but I hope what this debate demonstrates is that it is incredibly important. It's important for our industrial strategy, medical breakthroughs, securing our energy future, supporting our universities, and indeed, overall, our security as a nation. But it is also about people. These issues are not minor. Roughly a quarter of the University of St Andrews skilled workers' visa applications last year involved ATAS checks, and a tenth of the ATAS students had their start dates impacted. And as proud as I am of the university, I know it isn't the only top-level research centre in the UK. If we multiply up those figures, we're looking at thousands of delays and research projects impacted, time lost, and potentially money lost too. So I hope the Minister will use her time today to set out how we can address these issues and bring ATAS and its processes into the light. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered the Academic Technology Approval Scheme. Minister.
Thank you, Sir Christopher, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. And I also want to thank the Honourable Member for North East 5 for securing this debate. The Honourable Member for Cardiff South and Penarth, who is overseeing this area within the Foreign Office, was unable to be in the debate today. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to respond on his behalf and to again thank the Honourable Member, because I think fundamentally what is also important is that there is feedback to government and government departments where things could be improved, and also where there could be better join-up between departments, where sometimes, perhaps unintentionally, things can fall through the cracks, and where it may or may not be the case that there is sort of a system dysfunction, but it may also be sometimes an individual involved. It could be a training issue or new to the role. And so I'm not saying that I know all the details, but I think what is important is how we continue to maintain the best possible service for all of our constituents and for the whole of the country. And it is in that respect that I also appreciate the contribution from the Honourable Member for Strangford, who is always an important voice in our debates, and I think just raising a number of matters that I do want to seek to respond to today. It is important to reflect, firstly, I think, on the point made by the Honourable Member about our need to be attracting the brightest and the best to our country, to be supporting our economy, to be part of teams, international teams, often working on international research as well, where it is important, as part of Britain being a global and outward-facing nation, that we are also looking to those teams to bring the best knowledge and best insights from across the world. And that is part of the United Kingdom's success as a science and technology superpower, where global talent and how we work together, and it's just in a similar way that UK talent also goes abroad. Sometimes those research teams can be operating and working in this country and then in other countries. That's part of our work and how we grow our economy, but also look at where we might be working together on sensitive matters that underpin our security. And I will say just on that point that recognising the importance of making sure that we continue to attract talent was also part of the work we did last year on looking at how we both secure our borders and control immigration, but also look to how we widen routes where we can be attracting and supporting talent to come in, particularly where our economy needs to grow in new ways, and look to support our competitiveness in areas of the economy for the future. I will say as well that she has acknowledged, and I think that's important as well in this debate, that getting the balance right between attracting talent and making sure that we have the right checks in place is important, because many new technologies have both civilian and military uses, and we are also in a more complex world. And as proliferation risks grow, research intended to do good can also, in the wrong hands, lead to the transfer of sensitive skills, knowledge, networks, relationships and technological capability that the ATAS scheme is designed to prevent. And once sensitive knowledge is shared, it can't be recovered. And so I do welcome today's debate on the Academic Technology Approval Scheme, because it is important to recognise that ATAS is a national security vetting process, and it isn't a routine administrative check. It does exist to protect the United Kingdom from the unlawful transfer of that sensitive knowledge and technologies that could also contribute to the development of weapons of mass destruction or advanced military capabilities. And so it is important that we both remain open to global research talent while rigorously protecting our national security and making sure that security and openness strengthen one another when done well. I do just want to reference the debate in relation to the demand for ATAS, which is both I think a sign of the importance of the growing areas of research with our universities as well. It is demand that has increased sharply in recent years as the scheme has expanded to also reflect the growing and evolving threat landscape. Applications have risen from about 17,000 in 2017 to approximately 35,000 last year. And I do just want to mention that despite that growth, the vast majority of applications, about 98%, are processed within the 30 working day service standard, and many resolved more quickly. It is the case, however, that where applications are processed more, it is the case because they might be more straightforward and present no security concerns. Where cases might be more complex or potentially high risk, there can be additional security checks that are required, not all of which are within our control, within the FCDO or indeed within the Home Office. And that can take more time, sometimes more time than we might like as well. And I do recognise that when decisions take longer than the standard time frame, that can have personal impact, particularly where there might be some particular compassionate circumstances that can impact on applicants and also create uncertainty for universities. And I do think as well, if I can make some reference to acknowledging that there is work underway that is looking at faster triaging, providing surge support to consider more complex cases, IT improvements, and also ongoing engagement with universities. And that is important because we do recognise the challenge, and it is also the case in other visa circumstances with universities that might also do their own checks for international students, that how we recognise where there are start times for universities and students, that we don't push into a sort of backlog or a set of issues that might be just before university term times begin. And some of that work in trying to smooth that and support universities in how they do their checks, as well as how the Home Office might provide visas, and in between how the ATAS certificates might need to be issued in advance of visas being issued, that we do work to continue to smooth that relationship. And there are ways in which the Home Office continues to work with the DfE and universities to make sure that we can improve that.
She just mentioned the Home Office there, and I suppose that was part of our frustration as a team, that ATAS responsibility does sit within the FCDO rather than Home Office, and that sort of lack of knowledge and understanding. I'm very pleased to hear that there is work ongoing. Will she commit to ensuring that the House is properly updated in relation to that work, and will that work take on some of the suggestions that I've made? Because I think the key frustration for me as a team is I'm used to be able to being able to get some answers, and with ATAS it does feel that that is very, very difficult to do.
Minister.
I thank the honourable member, and I do understand the importance of that. And I think there are other issues that certainly in my, I will say, my previous role last year in the Home Office, experiencing working alongside other departments, and that includes DfE, it includes DSIT. And also in this respect, the honourable member has highlighted the relationship between Foreign Office-led processes, some of which also lead to and may require checks that are outside of the Foreign Office. And so I do take her point, and I will relay to my honourable friend who does oversee this area that that I'm happy to work with him on this as well, because I'm interested from my point of view in how Foreign Office-led services and delivery is the best that it can be, on how we can look to see if there are further lessons that can be learned, and how we can perhaps keep the honourable member and the House updated on where some of these improvements that we are already working on can, I hope, see a change, not least in the responsiveness to members of Parliament, which I do take very seriously, and I know my honourable friend also does. And so in that respect, I do appreciate the feedback, because as I continue to believe this, that it is important that government continues to learn. We are like any other organisation in which continuous improvement of our operations should be a matter of concern to all of us. And in this case, it certainly is. And it is in this respect as well that I emphasise that ATAS sits within a much broader government commitment to also supporting research, innovation and international collaboration. And our approach is to combine that openness with responsibility, and to continue to work closely with universities to improve guidance, streamline communication and ensure applicants understand ATAS requirements early. I will say it isn't always the case, but sometimes is the case that applications can be put in sometimes very close to the mark. And it can be the case, it can be an assumption that if there's a 30-day working standard, that we'll all be within 30 days. Again, I don't know the details of the honourable member's case. I do know that she is very assiduous in raising cases with her for her constituents. But it is important that we make sure there is that communication, and also that there are clearer routes for institutions to be raising concerns or look to improve transparency on processes and strengthen engagement with the sector. And at the same time, the government also continues to invest heavily in research and development, in a sense being a victim of our own kind of priorities there, where I think that seeing the increase in the demand for ATAS is a reflection of the government's own priorities, and also our recognition of it's important for us to attract that talent for the shorter and the longer term. And also we see that work going on through association with Horizon Europe, long-term funding in AI, clean energy, life sciences, deepening science and defence partnerships across regions, including the Indo-Pacific, over which I oversee some of our work as a country too. And ATAS supports that ambition by ensuring that the UK's research environment remains both secure and welcome to global talent here in good faith and wanting to support that work in the UK and internationally. If I could just make, before I conclude, some remarks in relation to the constituency case that the Honourable Member has highlighted. And I do very much appreciate that communication with the FCDO has been part of and a driver for the debate today. It is regrettable that the Honourable Member did experience that difficulty and did not receive clear information about her inquiry at an earlier stage. And on the particular very sad circumstances as well. And I am grateful to her both for the support she provided to her constituent and also her update on her constituent, both getting a positive certificate but also being able to spend time, very much important to be able to do that, time with his family under those very sad circumstances. She did reference, and I do want to recognise this, that when the situation was known and did get to the team, that the application was expedited, and I think that process completed within 14 days. That was important to us, and I know in some of the previous work I've seen in the Home Office, I know that it will have been important to those teams as well. And that was well inside the published service standard, and it does show what can happen when we are able to mobilise the teams in compassionate circumstances. And it's important that if there and where there are lessons to learn, that we continue to do that. And also I appreciate that in the correspondence that then she received, that there was a delay, and I think perhaps that was over the Christmas period, but we continue to try and make sure that we improve our service standards in relation to correspondence, and that is a priority matter for the department as a whole that may be relevant here.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for giving me. I just want to put on record my thanks. It's great to have that understanding that as a result of our actions, the case was expedited. I suppose what I've tried to illustrate today is that we actually had no real knowledge of that or knowledge of how to achieve that, or indeed that was the case. And I'm very grateful to her for giving that update.
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Member for that. And what I will also say to her is sometimes processes can mean that we may contact the constituent or the Home Office may contact the constituent sometimes earlier than the responding to the Member of Parliament. And sometimes that is joined up as well as it might be. Sometimes there can be a slight delay because it's very important that we make sure the constituent is updated in order to be able to make arrangements as they may wish to. And I do appreciate that there was a slight delay to that correspondence then coming to the Honourable Member to make sure she was fully informed at that time. But I do appreciate that this has been an important debate and recognising that feedback is important for how we continue to join up, but also recognising that the ATAS scheme is important as part of our vital security protections. It does operate strongly, as I think the data shows, and where under significant demand and cases are taking longer, the security of the United Kingdom does require careful and proportionate judgment, and even within that, where we can continue to improve our operations, we will certainly endeavour to do so. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered the academic technology approval scheme. As many have been say aye. Contrary no, I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting is suspended until 2:30 p.m.